Today we're going to be talking about teams 9 through 5 in the AVCA rankings. I know a lot of volleyball matches have been happening recently, and don't worry guys, those content will be getting up and loaded very soon. I'm starting to watch some of these matches to give us a better idea of some of these matches that have happened, and it's going to be good to be able to talk about them on this channel when the time comes. I asked this time, guys, that before we get started with talking about teams 9 through 5 in the AVCA, that you please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel, as every like and subscription that we get here helps grow our YouTube channel to be able to keep talking about the game of volleyball. And with that today, guys, let's start with number 9, Pittsburgh, from this list. Pittsburgh has been on the rise the last few years, and it all has to do with the fact that their coaching has been probably one of the best so far in the college world right now. For the longest time, Pittsburgh was being eliminated in the second round of playoffs. In fact, I think it was back-to-back years they were eliminated second round. And last season, Pittsburgh kind of had a magical run, and you're going to see why in a minute. Last season, Pittsburgh went 19-5 overall, and they went 14-4 in their conference. Some key matches that happened last season: they lost one and won one to Notre Dame. They won one and lost one to number 6 Louisville. They won one against Georgia Tech, won one against Florida State, beat LIU in the first round of the playoffs when playoffs happened, were able to beat number 10, the University of Utah, in the second round, which I had mentioned in an earlier video that I thought Utah had a chance of winning it last year, but sadly Pittsburgh pulled the upset on them. They then beat number 3, Minnesota, in a 5-set thriller in the regional semifinals before losing to Washington in 5 in the regional finals. This Pittsburgh team has been very magical to watch. They keep getting better every single year, and there's a good chance Pittsburgh might be able to continue this trend going forward. One of the reasons I say that is virtually their entire starting lineup is coming back, and even players who used to come off the bench to help make their team better on the floor has coming back as well. The only thing that Pittsburgh is currently missing right now is they do need that true opposite position. And at the time, you can probably get away with it with having an outside or maybe even a middle blocker run it. But if Pittsburgh can find that true opposite player to be on the floor when need be, you can expect Pittsburgh to pull another magical run going into this year's tournament. And not only that, but Pittsburgh has been improving so much that this season they are actually playing a little bit more ranked teams in their schedule this year. Some key matchups that people are going to want to watch. On August 23rd, they have already played Rice, who is currently ranked, not August 23rd, on August 27th, they played Rice, who is currently ranked number 23. These rankings obviously have changed since the recording of this video. They also played number 18, Washington, which happened on August 28th. And either of those two matches, guys, if you want to let us know down below in the comment section what has happened, please let us know. They played Baylor on September 4th. Same with those matches. At the time of recording of this video, they're most likely playing. So if you guys know the schedule of that or the results of that match, please let us know in the comment section below. They then play BYU on September 10th. And then this season, they get to play Georgia Tech twice this year, once on October 10th and November 19th. They play Florida State on October 17th. They'll play Notre Dame on October 22nd. And then they play Louisville on October 24th and later November 24th. Pittsburgh has been on the rise for a while, and there's very few weaknesses that this team currently has. In fact, this team has been working together for about 2 to 3 years now, and their coaching staff is really, really good as well. Pittsburgh is most likely aiming for a championship this year. The only thing that might cause them not to be able to win it is due to the fact that I believe one of their setters is about 5'8", and their backup setter is 6 foot tall, if I'm not mistaken. And so against taller teams, Pittsburgh might struggle with being able to block, but they can always sub in a setter. But at the same time, Pittsburgh, I believe, is on the rise and potentially could move up higher in the rankings this year, or they might not move up higher in the rankings based off what's happened when they play this year. I do expect if Pittsburgh does make the playoffs this year, they'll probably make another deep push again, depending on who they play and when they play and all that stuff. But Pittsburgh has been on the rise the last couple of years, and I would not be surprised at all if Pittsburgh could make the Final Four this year based off what happened last season, because it was a very magical run that they did, and they have been improving as a program as well. So keep an eye out for Pittsburgh this year, guys. Pittsburgh is probably going to be one of those teams everyone's going to keep an eye out just based off what they've done these last couple of years. Last season, Purdue had a very interesting season, to say the least, for themselves as well. Purdue went 16-7 overall in their season, and they went 14-6 in their conference. Some key matches that happened last season for them: they lost to number 1 Wisconsin twice. They lost to number 6 Minnesota twice, but they went to both of those sets. They lost to Minnesota. They did go to 5 sets, so they were able to compete with Minnesota, but just weren't able to finish off the matches to win. They beat number 24 Michigan twice, and then they won one and lost one to number 10 Penn State. And then the other thing too is they also won against number 9 Ohio State twice last season, so they can compete with ranked teams. In the playoffs, they beat High Point in the tournament before beating number 16 Oregon, and then in the third round of their playoff run, they lost to number 2 Kentucky, in which Kentucky eventually became the national champs. Purdue is going to have a very interesting season. Like Pittsburgh, Purdue is in need of a true opposite position at this time of the recording of this video. And the opposite position could help free up a lot of things for their team. The good news is that they have a lot of seniors who are returning from this team, with a sophomore and a junior also in their starting lineup as well, potentially, at least from the last match when they lost to Kentucky, if they were to keep that same lineup. Purdue should be able to compete this year. How far they get in the playoffs is a very unknown at this time, but Purdue's schedule does have the following for some key matches that people should look out for. They recently played number 25 Washington State on September 3rd. For those of you who want to let us know in the comment section down below how that match went. They play Louisville on September 10th. They play Ohio State on September 24th and later in the season on October 15th. They're going to play Illinois on October 1st and on October 6th. They then play Penn State on October 17th, and they play Nebraska on October 23rd and November 27th. They will then play Wisconsin on October 31st and later on in the season on November 12th, and they will play Minnesota on November 14th. Purdue fans will most likely get an idea of how their team is potentially by October 17th after the Penn State matchup. They do play some of these really good ranked teams, and they'll be being tested throughout the way of their journey into the playoffs if Purdue makes the playoffs. If Purdue does make the playoffs, I could see them being second, third, maybe fourth round into the playoffs. Purdue has a chance to do something magical this year. It just all depends on how they do during the season, where they're positioned come playoff time, and also depends on the senior leadership of the girls who are potentially returning and who could potentially be the starters for Purdue. We need to watch more of a Purdue potentially, because Purdue could be a interesting team as well. And I say interesting, I know I say that probably a lot, but I do find a lot of these teams interesting based off the rankings this year due to the fact of what happened last season. And so keep an eye out for Purdue, as Purdue could do something magical if the cards fall into place correctly for this team. All right, we finally get to talk about number 7, Minnesota. Last year, Minnesota went 16-3, and they went 15-2 in their conference. They were able to beat Purdue twice in 5 sets both times, like I had just mentioned with the Purdue section we were just talking about in this video. They were able to beat Penn State twice. Then they won one and lost one to Nebraska last season, when they were supposed to play Ohio State, but those matches were both canceled. Then in the first match against Wisconsin was canceled, but then when they played Wisconsin in the second match, they lost to Wisconsin. So they weren't able to play as many ranked teams last season as they needed to, which might explain what happened to Minnesota in the playoffs, because in the playoffs they were able to beat Georgia Tech in the tournament, but then they lost to Pittsburgh in the tournament. I believe if they actually had played more ranked teams, that might have reversed for Pittsburgh, even though I did say Pittsburgh did have a magical season last year. But there was always that chance that would have happened. In fact, I remember talking to a friend earlier last year. I remember saying, I believe Minnesota will make the Final Four. And boy, was I wrong last season. And that could have been because they didn't get to play as many ranked teams to figure out where they were going and position themselves better come playoff time. Now, Minnesota is returning Most of their players, 2 of their players, I believe, graduated from last season from what I looked at from their roster currently and who had played their last match against Pittsburgh. So 2 positions have to be filled, but you can never count Minnesota out, especially with their coach who's still there. I believe it's Hugh McCutcheon, but I believe he's still in charge there. But if he's still there, that's a huge advantage Minnesota has, just based off Hugh McCutcheon's record of being the former Team USA coaches. Now, that being said, some key matches that need to be talked about for Minnesota. This season, they've already played number 10 Baylor on August 27th. Please let us know in the comment section down below how that match went. If not, I'll probably be talking about it in a future video. They played number 1 Texas on September 1st. Let us know in the comment section down below how that went. On September 5th, they played number 5 Florida. And then on September 10th, they played number 21 Stanford. On September 11th, they're going to play number 14 Oregon. And then on October 1st, they play number 2 Wisconsin. And then later on in the season, they're going to play them on November 21st. They then play number 12 Penn State, which is supposed to happen on October 22nd. And later on in the season, they play them on November 26th. And then they play number 11 Ohio State, which is supposed to happen on October 24th. And then the second match between them and Ohio is happening on November 4th. They only played Nebraska once this year, and that match is going to happen on October 30th. And if you remember, Nebraska is ranked number 5, and we'll be able to talk about them later in this video. They will then play Illinois on November 6th, and finally they play number 8 Purdue on November 14th. Minnesota fans probably have a lot to be excited about this season. I still think Minnesota could make the Final Four this year. I cannot count this team out. They play a very tough schedule based off the ranked teams who they're going up against. I believe when they play Nebraska, though, on October 30th, that's going to be a more playoff atmosphere, I believe it is, because that match tends to be more playoff getting ready mode. But Minnesota fans will get a better understanding of where their team stands pretty quickly in the season, probably within the first 30 days of the season, as long as the team stays healthy. But Minnesota, I do expect Minnesota to potentially bounce back this year, could make the Final Four, maybe even the Final 8 this season for them. Minnesota has high expectations for me this season based off what happened last year. I still think they're a very, very legitimate program in the making, and they're just going to be on the rise continually. So look out for this team as well, guys, as Minnesota, in my honest opinion, I think is going to make the Final Four this year. If not, then they'll probably underperform in my eyes if that happens. But for now, I believe they can make the Final Four. Coming in at number 6, we have the Florida Gators. Florida last season, they went 21-4 overall, and they went 19-3 in their conference. Their first 2 matches when they were supposed to play a ranked team, which was supposed to be number 16 Missouri, were canceled. But then later on, when they played them twice, when Missouri was ranked number 25, they actually beat them twice when they were ranked 25. So I think if they had been number 16 at the time, I still think Florida would have beaten them, even if they had been ranked number 16. They were able to beat number 3 Kentucky before losing one to Kentucky. And then in the playoffs, they were able to beat Morehead State. They were able to beat number 9 Ohio State before losing to number 1 Wisconsin. Florida is always an interesting school because there's some years Florida does make the Final Four, and there's other years where Florida just doesn't do anything. And so I don't know what Florida team we're going to get this season out of them. I mean, currently right now from their last match from last season, they only lost 1 player, and they do have almost all returners at this point. And so Florida, I just don't know. I will take time to watch Florida for sure. In fact, currently, that's probably the next thing on my list is to see how Florida does against Stanford, because that's going to be a very interesting match to be able to watch, to say, and that will be made into a YouTube video hopefully very soon. Some key matches: number 5 Stanford on August 31st. Like I just mentioned, I am in the process of getting that ready to start watching it and get a better understanding of Florida and Stanford as well. They then played number 10 Minnesota on September 5th. They play Baylor on September 10th and 11th, and then they play Florida State on September 15th. They'll play Missouri on October 30th, and then they end the season, it looks like, with playing Kentucky on November 26th and 27th. Like I said, there's some years Florida is like a really good school and they're making it deep in the playoffs. And there's other years where Florida just doesn't seem to do anything. This season, we have no idea what Florida team we're going to get this season. And because of that, I don't really know where to rank them in the playoffs at this time. You're looking at a team that could potentially make the Final Four or a team that gets eliminated second or third round. Don't know at this point, okay? I really don't know what to say. I'm going to have to watch more film on them just to figure out where they would fall in these rankings. In my opinion, for the tournament, and we still got a few months to get into that, luckily, but I don't know at this point with Florida, and so I can't make a prediction of where I could see them going, because like I said, it's either they could make the Final Four or get eliminated in the second, third round. Who knows at this point with Florida? So I'm going to keep an eye out for Florida this year, because I think Florida can do, and I keep repeating myself on this, they can either do really good things or really bad things. It just all depends on how the team's looking, how they're doing when they're playing. So I'm going to keep an eye out for Florida this year. Finally, we're talking about number 5, Nebraska. Nebraska, in my opinion, I remember telling a friend last year, I believe Nebraska was a contender to win it all last season. I thought they did have the best shot, but sadly, Nebraska didn't meet those expectations. But they did do well last season. They went 16-3 overall. They went 14-2 in their conference. They lost one and won one to number 5 Minnesota. They were supposed to play number 1 Wisconsin, but both of those matches were canceled. They beat Illinois twice. They won one and lost one to number 11 Ohio State twice. But ironically, when they played them, all those matches went to 5 against Ohio State. So that's something interesting to point out with Nebraska from last season. And then they were supposed to play number 11 Penn State, but those matches were canceled, both of them. And then in the playoffs, they beat Texas State in the playoffs, and then were able to beat number 11 Baylor before losing to number 5 Texas. And if you remember, Texas did go to the finals, so I believe had Nebraska beaten them, they could have made it to the finals last year. But this is where things get interesting. From their starting lineup from last year, they've pretty much lost one player. They almost lost 2, but luckily Lexi Sun did come back for one more season. And so that gives Nebraska a little bit more hope to potentially do some or to make some noise this coming season. Some key matches that we should look out for Nebraska. They will play the University of Utah on September 11th. That will be a very interesting matchup to watch going into this year. They play Stanford on September 14th. Then they play Louisville on September 18th. And then they start playing Penn State on October 8th. And later on in the season, they'll play Penn State on November 19th. Then they'll play Illinois on October 16th. And then later on in the season on November 4th. They play Purdue on October 23rd and later on in the season on November 27th. They'll play Wisconsin on October 27th and November 26th. Minnesota, they'll play on October 30th. And finally, they'll play Ohio State on November 6th. Nebraska is one of those programs where if they don't make a deep run this year, then they'll just reload and try and make a deep run again next year. Nebraska most likely has the most experience out of this entire team. They've been so close to the finals. In fact, the year that I believe Stanford didn't win the finals, Nebraska won it all. So, I mean, Nebraska has done it in the last couple of years. Just the last few years, there's been a team called Stanford that has been in their way to win it all, except for the year that they didn't have to run into Nebraska. They didn't have to run into Stanford, or at least a very dangerous Stanford team. Nebraska this season could make a huge run. It just depends. I mean, this is Lexi Sun's last year of playing, and it was such a big deal on Instagram with her coming back. So I'm assuming the volleyball world thinks that Nebraska could potentially win it all. I don't know at this point. I still think Nebraska could make a huge run into the playoffs. Nebraska you could see Nebraska in the finals, maybe in the Final 8, Final 4. Don't really know. Got to watch some matches to get an idea of who they are. I do think that when they did lose Lauren, though, on their starting lineup, she was their middle blocker. I think that's a huge problem making for Nebraska if she did graduate, if I'm not mistaken. And that's going to be a problem. She had a lot of leadership for that team, and now she's gone. She's graduated. So it's Lexi Sun's team pretty much in a way. She's going to have to carry a lot of the offensive burden potentially this season. But Nebraska will make some noise no matter what in the playoffs. So I have high hopes for Nebraska this season as well. And I think a lot of us would actually enjoy watching Nebraska in any of these matches. I think when they start playing as well, I believe, just based off looking at their key matches that are coming up, I think by September 18th, I think a lot of Nebraska fans are going to understand where their team stands come playoff time. And I think it's going to make a lot of Nebraska fans excited about what their team potentially holds for this upcoming season. That's it for today's video, guys. I got to say, 9 through 5 is an interesting batch of schools to talk about. And it's going to be even more exciting to finish off this video next talking about teams 4 through 1, as these are the top 4 teams that the AVCA believes that are at this time. And then after this video series is done, we can actually start talking about some of these ranked matches and go into more in-depth details of what was, at least what I'm seeing from these teams. And potentially, my opinion might change based off the rankings and all that stuff as we continue on with this YouTube series of talking about women's college volleyball. With that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video today, guys. And if you did, please like and subscribe, as every like and subscription that we get for this YouTube channel can help grow so that we can continue talking about the game of volleyball. And with that today, guys, thank you for taking your time out of your day to listen. And as always, let's keep talking about the game we love, which is volleyball.